To Me Guys show. Guys, wonderful show coming at you tonight. None other than, I told you guys last time, I call her Dr. Winifred A. Winston, and she's been so kind as to come back and join us tonight. And we will share some information with you. But as you can see in her background, we see that beautiful book cover, Unchained. We will be talking about Unchained. We'll also be talking about autism and all of the different aspects of autism. And we will have, as always, a very informative show. Just want you guys to know again that you can certainly come and FaceTime Dr. Winifred Winston by choosing one of those cameras at the bottom. You can ask questions of her yourself, or if you choose to write them in the box, and then I will share them for you. But listen, let's move to the show. Now, Dr. Winifred Winston, I know that you haven't assumed that official. Now you say I give you these quotes. You haven't assumed that official title yet, but the breadth of your information is nothing short of doctoral.
Thank you. Thank you.
Listen, guys. Now, Dr. Winston is an advocate. She's an educator, author, speaker, and business coach. Now, she is also an administrator of a special education school and founder of the Dyslexia Association. Advocation, I should say. I always say association is stuck on the brain. Now, after working for a public school district and going through the IEP process with her daughter, Winifred quickly realized African-American parents lacked access to accurate information about dyslexia interventions and instructional strategies. Let that sink in a moment. Access to. Now, as we continue to introduce Winifred to you guys, now outside of her work, Winifred is a volunteer with state leader for dyslexia grassroots organization and co-founder of their local advocacy and support group for parents and children in the Baltimore, Maryland area. Now, I do not want to give all of this because I want Ms. Winston to hop in and share some more pieces of this with you, but I do want to stop for a moment and say happy Kwanzaa and Merry Christmas to all of you. This is going to be our last show for 2019, and we just want to make sure that we get that out there. Merry Christmas and Happy Kwanzaa. And we want you to know, and we'll talk about this at the end of the show, we'll open up next year on January the 10th, and our guest will be none other than Attorney Darrell Washington. Now, some of you may know that name. If you remember the incident in Dallas, Texas, with Amber Geiger, the police officer taking the life of Botham Jean. Well, Attorney Washington is the gentleman that did the due diligence as the family's attorney, and we know the history. So, without further ado, we just want to set the program and to let you know that you are in for a ride. Good evening, and I'm going to call you doctor. I warned you about that.
All those people that went to school and did their thesis and dissertation and everything, I only let you say it, but I don't really accept it.
I appreciate that. Well, listen, Winston, will you please, if you just share a little bit more with our audience about the advocacy organization itself.
Sure.
And how it, okay.
Yeah, so what happened was my daughter was struggling to learn how to read. And so I was trying to access services and just really figure out what was going on. And I went to a lunch and learn where an attorney, a special education attorney, was talking about the IEP process, which is the individual education plan. And a young lady, as we were leaving, she said, "Oh my gosh, you ask such good questions. Have you ever heard of decoding dyslexia?" I was like, "No, what's that?" She was like, "Decoding dyslexia, Maryland, they have a chapter. You should, look them up." And I did. And it's a grassroots parents organization, parents, educators, related service providers, and those who really want to see that all children read. They meet monthly. We have Advocacy Day in February, and it was just life-changing because through that organization, I was able to access information, accurate information, resources in order to help my daughter. So I just went head in, just full throttle advocating, going to our capital in Annapolis, serving on a panel, and just becoming very involved with the advocacy group, because I realized that while some of the things that I do don't help my daughter, but it helps children that come behind her. And as I'm advocating for her, I'm also helping children coming behind her. And what I realized is that parents didn't have access to the information, and African-American parents. You call me doctor. I do have a master's degree. I worked in education. I was a teacher. I was an adjunct professor at the university level. I worked in K-12, and I didn't know how to access resources for my daughter. I didn't know. So that really was a pain point for me. And I said, I'm going to do my due diligence to spread awareness and educate all parents, but focusing on African-American parents because it's hereditary.
Doing away with, for those out there with diplomas that say doctor, but staying with the fact that the information that you have to share is doctoral, if you will. If you will share with us, I know that there are various types of dyslexia and that kind of thing. And I think, as a matter of fact, I know when we talked the last time that you were here with us, is that you shared so many diverse forms that many of our audience, of course, and I admit it, I didn't know either. And if you will just kind of revisit those a moment. I mean, obviously you don't have to go through all of them, but if you kind of revisit that and share with us the different types and that situation there.
So dyslexia, we know, is neurological in origin, and it's when a person has trouble with identifying sounds with letters, right? So spelling is hard, and decoding, which is sounding out words, is hard. That's reading. The IDEA, that it would fall under category 09 under specific learning disability in reading. But then you also have, for lack of a better term, this is not the official term, but for a lack of a better term, dyslexia in math, which is dyscalculia. And then you have dysgraphia, for a lack of a better term, dyslexia in written expression with writing. And it can show up in two ways: fine motor, where the handwriting is very sloppy, or written expression. How do you get those thoughts out of your head onto paper? So there's 3 different types: reading, writing, and math. And then if you dig deeper, there are actually about 3 or 4 different types of dyslexia. What they say is when you meet one dyslexic, you've not met another the same, right? So every person with dyslexia is a little different. Although there are similarities, it's a difference in every person because of what area the deficit is in and where they struggle. So it's very important that parents educate themselves and really find out what their child's strengths are and what the areas of weaknesses are, but to also focus on those strengths, because building up that confidence is very important. I just met a young man at the barbershop where I go. And he heard me talking about dyslexia because I had the honor of going to Portland, Oregon last month to the International Dyslexia Association annual conference. And all the experts were there. And he heard me talking about the trip to my barber. And so we walked out together, and then he pulled me to the side and he said, "Hey, you know, I heard you talking about dyslexia." And I said, "Oh yeah, my daughter is dyslexic." He was like, "I think I am." I said, "Oh, really? Well, tell me about your early childhood, you know, your school days." He said, "Oh, I was in the special education class. You know, nobody ever told me I was dyslexic. And, you know, my confidence really suffered. But, you know, once I got this barbershop open, I'm like, so what? I can't read as fast as anybody else." But this man is a father, is a grown man, is an entrepreneur. And when he was sharing with me that he lacked confidence, he still had a little bit of that in him. You know, because he said, you know, my mother used to just yell at me doing homework. And now I found myself doing the same thing to my daughter. And then I realized, wait a minute, she's struggling the same way I'm struggling. So he said he started doing his own research and Googling and watching YouTube videos. And he was like, I think I'm dyslexic. He reads books by audiobooks. And he said, you know, and I read a little slow, but had I known and gotten help earlier, he said, maybe I would be further along in life. And he's an entrepreneur, and he has a CDL license, and he told me some other credential he has, and he told me about a nonprofit he wants to start. And I started telling him some successful African-American people who were dyslexic. And he was like, oh yeah, I know Whoopi Goldberg, Danny Glover, Octavia Spencer, Mary J. Blige. He knew some of the same people because he had done his research. But I think about, that third grader, that second grader, that fourth grader. How about that high schooler, right? That middle schooler who knew he couldn't read. So it's just so important that parents do their due diligence and do their research. And it's so important for me to keep spreading awareness and spreading the word so we don't continue to have stories like this where people are finding out as adults that I'm dyslexic and had no clue. Yeah.
So, as you share that as two educators, how important would you say, and I think I know the answer, but I want our audience to hear that. I keep watching my screens here and the thumbs going up, etc. How important would you say your administrators understand what you're sharing? Because we talk about IEPs. Hi, sweetheart. We talk about IEPs and people many times, as you're sharing, don't really have the knowledge. And if we dare say our minority parents, even 2 or 3 or 4-fold. However, when they go to various schools and the administration doesn't even understand it, and those that are I'm trying to say this nicely, those that are supposed to be preparing the IEPs for said child, however, they just try to write something up to end quickly. What advice would you give to the parents to challenge, if I can use that word, administrators and teachers when it comes to that?
That's why decoding dyslexia was so important. Now, you call me doctor. I mean, I've got some parents that are double and triple doctors that will just run circles around me. And for no other reason than they had maybe multiple children with learning disabilities, right? And they had to hire an attorney and they had to go through this process multiple times. So an organization like Decoding Dyslexia, and we're in all 50 states, is so important because what we're trying to do now with our local chapter here in Baltimore City is partner with the school district, right? Hit it at the local level. Each jurisdiction, each local school district is different. And we know that each school is different. We know that each IEP team is different. And it's all about collaboration and education. So you as the parent, you need to educate yourself, read books. What I want to say is stop going in Facebook groups asking questions. I need you to pick up a book and read it to understand, then watch a YouTube video by an expert so you at least know what questions to ask and share information. I shared articles, right? I even had the book with me at the IEP meeting and read out of the book and quote factual articles and research, right? Because they're all about data and what's research based. And some of them, of no fault of their own, don't know because higher education institutions don't teach the science of reading. So we have several teachers that are, a part of Decoded Dyslexia, and they testify that I learned nothing about this in undergrad. I came out to be a teacher and I didn't learn the science of reading. So it's about collaboration, education, and really advocating for your child, right? Like speak up, ask questions, but we are really trying to partner with our local school district. When I was in Portland, I ran into an organization where I know we purchased curriculum from them. So I'm like, oh, okay, this is, it's called Wit and Wisdom. I said, well, how would this curriculum close the gap, right? And they're telling me Wilson, and I'm like, well, Wilson must be taught with fidelity, right? Now, these are teacher talk education words. What's fidelity? It must be taught in the way that the program was laid out, for lack of, to really simplify it. It must be taught, if it says step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, it must be taught in that order. And what teachers are doing is picking out step 1, picking out step 3, or they haven't been certified and properly trained, right? I met the founders of the Wilson system. I spoke with the husband and the wife. They had a meet and greet. We were in there and I'm talking to the founder and I'm sharing my experience where I knew the teacher was not certified. She might have been trained, but she wasn't certified because what did I do before the IEP meeting? I called the 800 number. I gave her name. I gave her email address to see if she was on their list of certified, and she was not. So the school district is saying we're going to use Wilson to close the gap with this Wit and Wisdom curriculum. So then I saw a presentation where a private school in Richmond, Virginia, for dyslexics use wit and wisdom. And I said, I would love to come to your school to see how you're doing that, because this is a private school for kids with dyslexia. They're using the same curriculum that my district just purchased. And I know that they're using some type of Orton Gillingham based structured literacy to, help these dyslexic kids access that content, but also learn to read and move ahead. So I came back, I sent my follow-up emails, and I said to them, I would love to connect with you, right? The regional people here in Baltimore City with this curriculum, and let's take a trip up to Virginia, we're in Maryland, and see how this private school is doing it, right? So offering solutions and offering to partner with them. And I'm not afraid to do that. I think I have a unique lens, having been an administrator first and working with principals and having hard conversations with staff, having worked in HR, then going in the classroom as a teacher after the fact, being a teacher, having a stack of IEPs. Can y'all see my hands? A stack of IEPs and not knowing how to help my students. Literally, like, how do I accommodate? Like, having a lens like that, and now being a parent, and all I could think of, my baby's not going to be in high school about to graduate reading on a 3rd grade level. And I had students like that. So I say all that to say that, parents have to feel empowered to ask questions, to research and advocate for their child, because I shared information with our IEP team that they didn't know. And, I just have to think of no fault of their own. I don't think anyone intentionally goes into education and say, I want to fail kids, right? I don't think they do. But unfortunately, the way systems are set up, the way school districts lack funding and money and resources, they don't have time to find the articles. So I did. And I shared them. Yeah.
And that's cool. Listen, allow me the opportunity to introduce Dre. Dre is an elementary school teacher in New York.
Hey.
And Dre is familiar. You guys may know one another already. And I asked Dre to join us. I'm glad he's here. It's good to see you, Dre. And I just want to share with Dre, feel free to jump in and share anytime. We were discussing IEPs and what do you think parents need to know? And that's what Winifred is sharing with us right now. So feel free, if you want to comment where she just finished, feel free to do that.
I did want to say real quick that parents sometimes aren't aware of the power they have when it comes to IEPs, and how IEPs is a committee of people, which includes the parents.
Yep.
So it's not a teacher, the special education teacher that's coming in and telling the parent, this is what your child needs, so we need to do it, sign here, and that's that. In many cases, the parent is the expert on the child. And you're right, some teachers would just rush through IEPs just to get it done, and it fails the student. But the individual education plan is exactly that. Individual education plan, which should be individualized. This is like the one thing that should not be cookie cutter at all, because students have various needs. And although it may be similar, in those similarities, there's uniqueness, so they can have a similar diagnosis. Not everything is going to work for each student with that same diagnosis. So parents, like you mentioned, which I have yet to have that, parents come to me with articles. I wish that was the case. Where they say, because, truth be told, I've been doing this now. This is my third year.
Oh, wow.
As a special education teacher. And when I started teaching, I was still in school, and I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I was doing. So I'm listening to you talk, and I'm like, hey, I was that teacher.
Yeah.
and now I find myself spending a lot of my time at home reading, researching, looking up YouTube videos on ways that I can help my students. And I remember there was a student that we had who had IEP, but I had challenges trying to get the school to consider requesting evaluation for dyslexia. And for some, I don't know, maybe you have experience with this.
Okay. But they don't want to say the word dyslexia, because when they say the word dyslexia, that's money and resources. So you need, for example, my daughter's IEP said she had a specific learning disability in reading, right? And I'm like, okay, what is that? What is that? So then they didn't say dyslexia. At the very end, someone slipped up and said the word dyslexia. So I said, oh, does she have dyslexia? Oh, no, we didn't say that. We can't. we can't diagnose that. They cannot diagnose, but they can identify characteristics of.
Yep.
So when I took the IEP home, I had my cousin look over it, who's an attorney who worked in special education law. And then I had someone else I knew who was a special educator look over it. And it was 46 pages. And I know that her and my daughter attended a charter school. I know I was on the board. This is nothing. I was on the board at her charter school. So I had a great relationship with staff, and I know that they had every intention to do well by my child. But the way that IEP was written was that anybody could work with her. And when I read it over and I read my book, right, and I started educating myself, I said, the way this is written is saying that anybody can work with her. And we know that that won't be sufficient because she's not making progress now. I said, I need someone trained in structured literacy. They said, well, Miss Winston, we can't name a program. We don't put a program in there. I said, I'm not asking you to put a program. I said, I don't care if you put Wilson, Linda Bell, Orton Gillingham. I need structured literacy because my research shows me. Then I grabbed my article and I started reading from it that this is what works for children with dyslexia. I said, now, you're telling me specific learning disability. I said, but based on my research, my daughter has dyslexia and this is what works for her. So what's missing in a lot of those IEPs are the correct interventions. It'll have accommodations. You can give my baby extra time all day long. If you don't teach her how to decode and read those words, that's not doing anything for her. So again,
and a lot of times the management needs that they address in IEPs usually address behavioral management needs.
Yes.
Or to keep them
so
contained, not really. So, and that's where things like OG and other programs should be input, like when it talks about the management needs of, and this is what parents need to understand. Every IEP has what's called a section that talks about management needs. And it sounds like, okay, what do we need to do to manage the student? Really, what it is what does the educators need to do to help provide specific needs for the student? It's not like, okay, what do we need to do to manage the student? It's what do we need to do to meet the student's particular needs?
Yes.
And so it could be the wording in it.
Well, I'm gonna be honest. Like, even though I have all this knowledge, I go back and I look at my daughter's IEP and I'm like, this is a hot mess. This didn't change from this meeting to this meeting, which I didn't notice because I didn't read it word for word. And then the goals, I could tell my friends, I said, these goals aren't right, but I don't know how to tell them to make it right. Like, I don't know how to write SMART goals, right? But I know that what this is saying is not going to help her. 80%, 70%, like I didn't really fully understand that. And what I did, I'm very transparent. Like the guy in the barbershop, like, I'll talk about my daughter having dyslexia and, she'll hear me out and be like, oh, dyslexia again, mommy, I'm going to go wait in the car. But I talk about it and I'm not embarrassed and I'm not ashamed. I asked for help. I saw a woman at a meeting. She seemed very knowledgeable. She was a nurse by trade, so some of that brain sciencey stuff she caught on to very quickly and she understood. I said, well, do you have time to meet me maybe in the library to go over my daughter's IEP with me before I have my next meeting? I didn't have money to pay an advocate at that time, but I sought out that parent who I could tell knew her stuff. And we met and she marked it up and explained it to me and gave me tips on how to say it. You know what I mean? Whereas other parents, nobody's going around saying, oh, my child has an IEP. My child has ADHD. My child has dyslexia. You know what I'm saying? But when you don't know, you've got to swallow your pride and ask for help. And what I post all the time is get comfortable with the uncomfortable. It was very uncomfortable for me to talk about deficits in my child to strangers, essentially, right? It was very uncomfortable to read that 46-page document and not understand more than half of it and then try to go back and fight for what my daughter needs. And I told them in the IEP meeting, I don't understand. Could you speak English? Explain it to me.
And here's the thing about IEPs. And again, I had two kids with IEPs. My youngest son, who just got declassified, and my oldest son, who had an IEP throughout his whole school, right? And this is before I was a teacher. And I would read this stuff and think to myself, I have no clue what I'm reading. No clue. But in my mind, I'm thinking, but the educators know what's best.
Yep.
Right. And I would have conversations with the IEP coordinator at my school, who's awesome, by the way. And I would ask, well, why are we using verbiage that is so academic and difficult for our parents to comprehend? Shouldn't we speak in terms that they're able to understand. We're using all these big words and they don't get it. Like we can't expect parents to understand, teacher talk. And
That's what I call it too.
I think that it's not fair. It's not fair because let's say the IEP it could also be implemented at home if parents can understand it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Every parent has a copy of the IEP, right? They have the right to see it, question it, make changes. They have more powers than teachers have. But there's some things that we can do together to partner up to make sure that the students' needs are met both at home and at school. And I think that it's intimidating for parents who
very, very much so.
Yeah, who read it and they're like, I'm just gonna leave this to the teachers because first off, it's already
they're the
intimidating
experts.
to hear, that your child
allegedly
needs an IEP and that they're in special education because a lot of parents don't want that stigma on their kids because they think it exists. Special education today is much different than it was when I was in school 20 years ago.
Yep.
Right? So now, like having kids declassified. My son is declassified. He's in the 7th grade. He no longer needs an IEP, right? And it seems like schools today, at least in New York City, are trying to look for ways to declassify students, hopefully in the right way.
Yeah. But see, with proper interventions, what I tell parents is like with the dyslexia, the administration has to be on board with this child has dyslexia and how we're going to service them. But also, if they get the interventions that they need, as they get older and as they master it, they may just need accommodations, right? Mm-hmm. My daughter is always going to be dyslexic. And we recently, in the same evaluation, she's ADHD, but I, like so many other parents, didn't believe that. I'm like, I have high energy. She has high energy. We're alike. But then throughout this, I realized I'm ADHD. I never knew it. But as I'm reading up on it, I'm like, oh my gosh. And that's why she does this. And that's why. So then you have the ADHD with the dyslexia. I was thankful though, we didn't identify ADHD first, because what they would have said is, she's inattentive. She's not focused. And that's why she's not learning to read. So I was happy to get dyslexia. Yeah, I was happy to get dyslexia first, but they all have to be on board. And if we get the interventions, right, they can then get accommodations in high school. Right. And then accommodations in college, which look differently. So once they learn the strategies and they understand how to read, then we can start implementing, pulling back on some of those interventions. They may not need the tutoring, but the accommodations, like she's going to probably always need more time. She's probably always going to need to be by herself in a small, quiet environment to test to be successful. You know what I mean? But varying on the level of the disability, some may need the IEP the whole time. But some children, they can scale back and then get the 504 because they just need the accommodations. But that's why early intervention is so, so important. I have a parent right now. I put a nasty post on Facebook because I was just pissed off after talking to that entrepreneur. And then another parent keep waiting and seeing. The little boy is either ADHD and dyslexic or ADHD. All the signs are there, all the stuff. I said, how about this? Just treat it like it is. Here's some resources. Here's some things you can do. Treat it like it is if you don't want to label him, but why not get the evaluation so you know exactly what's wrong? When the school came back to me and said, let's do an evaluation, they were tiptoeing around it. I don't, since you've done the SST process. And I said, no, I've worked with kids with learning differences. No. I did my internship at Special Olympics, North Carolina. Let's evaluate her so we can rule it out. Let's rule it out. I'm on board with it, but parents don't want to do that.
And parents, because they think once they evaluate it, they have to go through the process. Parents don't have to have any services that they don't want for their kids. They can get evaluated and they can be autistic. And if the parents say, I don't want my child in a special class, they don't have to be in a special class.
Yep. And this is what I always joke with I joke and say this a lot.
I'm going to ask why you got to talking, because I'm seeing these thumbs and hearts going up. I have one parent keep asking. Well, I'm sorry, her name is Sandifer. Ms. Sandifer keep asking, can you tell me some signs that may indicate that a child may be dyslexic?
Sure.
So Ms. Sandifer, we got you.
Yes. So one telltale thing for me was my daughter was not remembering sight words. Right? Okay. Sight words are the devil for dyslexics. They don't make any sense. You can't figure it out. You have to remember it. and memory, work in memory may be impacted. So let's say, for example, we have 5 spelling words, and then we did the spelling test. She'd make 100, and then the next week we'd study 5 more because she was at a small private school before public. And it was like the first 5 she never learned. It was like we never went over them. And I said, what is going on? Now, my daughter was 3 saying defecate. Her vocabulary was off the charts. But remembering sight words and time, telling time, oh my gosh. She learned time in kindergarten. And I got her, what is it, Sophia the First watch and everything. Her first grade teacher looked at me like I was crazy. I would have never believed that. Those concepts, she'll say she's to this day, she'll be like, oh, mommy, we went last year. I'm like, no, that was 2 weeks ago, or yesterday. If they have trouble remembering their alphabets, right? They can't get the alphabets down. Different things like that. Chime in, Dre, because it's multiple things at different levels you see. But when they're younger, remembering sight words, learning the alphabets, and this is what I learned in Portland. If they've had a speech deficit before they started school, because speech is language and dyslexia is a language-based learning difference. So when kids go through Child Find and they get speech services, after the speech services are ended, it shouldn't stop. They should be reevaluated because they are at risk for being a struggling reader if they had a speech deficit.
Yeah.
A lot of them will say, I got speech when I was younger, then I didn't get anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. True. I don't know. I'm not too knowledgeable about dyslexia. Still doing research and learning about that. But one thing I do know is it's the coding.
Decoding. So they'll sound out a word, right? My daughter could sound out the front of the word. She could sound out the end of the word, but she couldn't put it together. Right. So that's one key sign. I'm like, well, you got the first part, you got the last part. Then she'll say some word that's not even close, remotely close to it. Spelling is horrific. Oh gosh, I wish I could show you guys a note she left me the other day. Because
we're telling them to spell the way we want them to and read the way we want them to. And that's the challenging part of the dyslexic diagnosis, is because it's not that they can't or unable to. If they were able to formulate their own language and their own writing, they can do it. They can create their own writing, and they'll be able to do it because they decode differently than everybody else. So it's not like they're incapable of writing.
And I want to make that clear. So most dyslexics have average to above average intelligence. It has nothing to do with intelligence. So a good example I like to give parents is like, we learn sight words through flashcards, right? Flashcards are the devil. Well, my daughter would learn sight words. We did it multi-sensory. So we go, went, W-E-N-T. She tap it out on her arm. Went, W-E-N-T. I would have her air write it, W-E-N-T. Went, W-E-N-T. What is your mouth doing when you say went, Logan? W-E-N-T. We would engage all the senses and going over sight words, and we'd make it a game. And I bought some kind of clay stuff that she could take apart and make the words with. But this helps plant it in her brain and remember it. Because that's what works. Those flashcards, that doesn't work for dyslexics at all. But go with your gut. If you feel like something is not right, my daughter's my only child, the first one, and everyone would say, oh, you're a first-time mom, you're overthinking it. But I knew at pre-K at 4, something just wasn't clicking, because kids who left out of her preschool were reading and she wasn't. And I read to her every night. We read to her a lot. But she just wasn't catching on. Oh, by first grade, she's just going to take off. You watch, you'll see. She's going to take off. She didn't take off. So, go with your gut. Research. There's a great website I like to refer parents to. It's called understood.org. And it has a plethora of practical, digestible, parent-friendly information.
Yeah. That we have Mrs. Austin from Atlanta is asking, and I was writing it down, that's why you saw me keep putting my head down here. She's want to know, are there specific tests that will confirm or refute a person being dyslexic?
Yes. So, I normally I have everything here. So you want to take a cognitive evaluation, and then also the academic evaluation, and with you're going to be testing for 5 areas in reading, right? So if you look at the science of reading, there's 5 areas that we must tap into to be successful readers. So those are the areas that you're going to want to have assessed, and I can't remember them off the top of my head. I never remember these things. Phonemic awareness, I don't even know if I'm saying that one right.
Phonemic awareness.
Yeah, see, I don't even know how to say that.
That's okay.
But look, can you imagine being at the table and they're spitting out all that mess?
Yes.
And you're like, explain that. What the phenome, what phonics? What are you saying? But there are 5 areas in reading. So you want a cognitive evaluation and you want the academic evaluation. A speech language pathologist can do it. A neurological psychologist can do it. Now, here's the kicker. You can request the independent educational evaluation from the school, right? But you can also get one yourself, but there's a cost. It can cost anywhere from $3,500 to $5,000 for an independent educational evaluation. You can also ask that the school pay for one, but that is a process. Now, here's the kicker. If you go to a private practice, they're going to tell you straight off the bat, we don't accept insurance, so you need to pay. But if you go to a hospital, like a pediatric hospital, they may accept medical insurance. So when my daughter was evaluated, she came back with dyslexia, ADHD, anxiety, and dysgraphia. Well, anxiety and ADHD are medical. Those are medical coded, like billing. And so therefore insurance may pick that up. And so ours was covered at the pediatric hospital. Okay. So that's why it's so important that you join a support group like Decoding Dyslexia. There's a branch in Atlanta, and I will be in Atlanta in April for the Academy of Orton Gillingham annual conference. I'll be presenting with my my attorney friend. We're going to talk about the 8 steps in the IEP process. But when you join a support group like that in your area, they'll tell you where you can go to get evaluations, where they've gone, because we house that information because we've all been through it.
Wow. Now you mentioned dysgraphia.
Mm-hmm.
Can you elaborate on that just a little bit?
Yes. So my daughter, hers is more fine motor skills. She's 9 years old and she's about 5'1". And so I just said she's long and lanky, you know, she's clumsy, you know, she's got to catch up to her body. But when we were at a small private school, they taught her cursive. So she didn't start out writing in print. So a lot of the telltale signs you see in dysgraphia or dyslexia, like reversals of B and D, we didn't see that. She's writing in cursive. You know, the B and D in cursive doesn't look anything alike. And so she was writing in cursive. So we didn't see the signs. But what you'll see with dysgraphia is that they have issues with spacing words, right? So you teach them to put one finger to move over to space, like they'll just write it. And they don't move over, and the handwriting is illegible sometimes, very sloppy. I told her school, because I didn't know. I said, well, she's in public school. I said, well, she learned how to write in cursive, so her print's going to be a little sloppy because she's always written in cursive, and I can't get her to write in cursive now because she said, well, mommy, none of the other kids do. So when you see a very sloppy handwriting, when you see that they should be able to write sentences, and they're just writing words, like they can't get the thoughts out, they're not grasping the concept as they learn how to write, that's when it comes into play. So sometimes it can be the fine motor skills, but you'll see the spacing is off, you'll see it very sloppy, and then sometimes kids just struggle to get the information from their head onto paper. You know, a lot of people struggle with writing. I know what I want to say, but I don't know how to say it. I can't get it out. It could be, you know, dysgraphia. It could be. And sometimes the doctors will say developmental coordination disorder, DCD, but if you dig enough, DCD and dysgraphia may not be the same, but it just depends.
Wow. Listen, it's so much education here, and so many thumbs are going up and so many hearts are going up, and I don't want to hold you all night, and it's the perfect segue as we talk about dysgraphia into you being a best-selling author in your book Unchained. So
Unchained Me Mama.
Can we morph over to and talk a little bit about Unchained?
Okay, so it's actually, so my daughter was identified in 2017, and I wanted to write a book. So here we go with this identification of dyslexia. And I mean, I'm sure you guys can tell just based on what I know, I've been in the thick of this, right? It kind of consumed me. I was falling asleep listening to webinars. And I mean, I'm just like, I got to get this information. I need to understand it, because first I need to understand special education. Then I need to understand dyslexia along with my baby strengths. And then I need to understand the IEP process, right? And the science of reading. Anyway, so me and my daughter, I was just saying, I talk to my daughter. I tell her when I'm not happy. I try to explain what depression is. I just talk to her. These are things my mom didn't share with me. And she said, well, mommy, you don't like this job? I said, no, it's really not working out. And well, mommy, you had your own business before. I said, I know, but I had to take a step back. And now I want to figure out what I want to do. She said, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? I said, well, I know I want to write a book. And she said, well, just write a book, mommy. And I said, well, okay. Right. And then later I paid a book coach, and we never got the book off the ground. And lo and behold, in 2018, a sister that I never knew, we have the same father, found me on ancestry.com. And so I say to her, I don't know if you know about this type of business, but I was a career consultant and I work one-on-one with clients, and I don't want to do that. I want to go more virtual, do some group and membership. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. And I want to write a book, and I recently paid this book coach, but I don't know. My sister was like, at the time, she was a 4-time best-selling author. She's now a 6-time best-selling author. She was like, I just quit my 6-figure job with Booz Allen, and I'm full-time entrepreneur, and I do everything I said I wanted to do, my sister was doing. So we talk almost every day. We met. We have so much in common. There's like 9 of us. And she was producing 2 anthologies. And an anthology is a book collaboration with multiple authors around a certain topic. So one was Fiercely Speaking and how women use their voice. And then Unchain Me Mama, the forgiveness factor, right? So I was like, okay, I'll be in your anthology, Fiercely Speaking. I want to use my voice and speak about being sexually assaulted, right? And she's like, oh, okay. So then we're talking and just having a regular conversation, getting to know each other. And then the next day we talked, she said, I want to talk to you about something. She said, whenever you talk about your mom, I could feel that there's something else. I can sense that there's something else. And I think you should do Unchain Me Mama, the forgiveness factor. I was like, what? You use our personal conversation, now you're spinning it into business? I'm like, what? And the premise is, the book is Unchain Me Mama, the forgiveness factor, lessons learned on my journey to forgiveness. And so I thought about it and I said, okay, I'll do Unchain Me Mama. I'll talk about my journey to forgiveness. It was a pain point for me. And when I tell you guys it was a pain point for me, it was very hard because my mother is deceased and I was sexually assaulted by my brother. So of the 9 siblings, this particular brother, he and I are the only 2 that share the same mother and father. So, and I was raised by my mother and he was raised by our father. So it's very hard for my mother because me and my mother doted on him. He's older than me. We doted on him because I didn't grow up with him. So whenever he'd get to visit, I'm like, oh, my big brother. And my mother, this is a child she didn't have custody of. So it was like her son, he could do no wrong. One time we had a fight and he hit me upside the head with 2 double D batteries. And I had the big double D battery print on my forehead and I got in trouble. This is when we was little, so fast forward when I was 18 and about to graduate high school, the sexual assault happened. And, it was a part of me that understood she loves her children, right? Like she loves her son, she loves her daughter. But then it was a part of me that said, look, you raised me. Like, why you don't have my back? Her immediate response was, no, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. I'm going to lose everything. How am I going to get him out of jail? I don't even think I got a hug that night. When I came back from the hospital without my mother to go get a rape kit done, I don't believe I got a hug. I don't believe anyone said it's going to be okay. When I decided to write this story, I called my older sister from my mom and I said, look, I'm writing this story. You're going to be in it, but this is my story. This has nothing to do with with you per se. It's not about you. This is my story. And, you know, my sister told me, nobody even realized what you were going through. We all had our own shit. That's what she basically said. Like, we didn't even realize how this impacted you. You went off to college on a college scholarship. You were female athlete of the week. You were featured in the local newspaper. Like, I was a little local celebrity in my town. You know, I just went back to school, but no one thought about how it impacted me. And I just had a lot of anger towards my mom. So the deadline for me to get my content submitted was my birthday, January 31st. And my birthdays are really hard because that's the holiday that I really, it hits me that my mom is not here. Because if nobody knows your birthday, your mother does. And so I turned in my content on January 31st. And I said, you know what, I'm going to tell this story because I think I can help other moms. And it gave me an opportunity to step away from dyslexia, right? To step away from all that advocacy and still do something for me, to then move my second career phase and entrepreneurship journey forward with getting this story out. So I was able to collaborate with my sister and talk about that in this book, Unchain Me, Mama, The Forgiveness Factor.
Wow, that is so powerful. And wow, I know you see me always glancing up and doing stuff because I have another monitor here. And the thumbs up and the sad faces and wow, it's much love. As a matter of fact, much love to you. And you know, just let me say, for myself, that is very powerful.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of courage to just mention things because, as we all know, unfortunately, things happen in our families, and many times people take it to the grave.
Yeah,
and they are damaged forever. And sadly, we do not address it. And we do not, as you stated, you are wondering and you're sharing with us that you don't even think you got a hug.
No.
After you were violated.
Yep.
And that's very.
And see, my mom was born in 1936. They didn't talk about things like that. I was very vocal. Like, when it happened, I called my dad. He hung up on me, told me I was lying. You know, I would talk to people about it. 10 years to the date of the assault, I did rape crisis volunteer work. I held victims' hands in the ER room and fussed at the doctors who kept us waiting for 4 to 6 hours. And then they would assign a new nurse who didn't know what the hell she was doing. And I'm like, no, scrape this way. And I'm, you know, there being an advocate for that victim. And that was like closure for me. But I immediately understood, and I didn't want to accept it, especially when I was in college, because I was starting to suffer from PTSD and I would black out. And I was afraid of losing my scholarship. And I was so focused. I was going to the 1996 Olympics. That was like a goal of mine. This was like 1993. And so when I started having these blackouts and like my friends started looking like my brother, and roommates would come back and say, oh, we hung out on Thursday night. We came back to your room. You were in a corner in a fetal position crying with the lights off. I have no recollection of it. Right? It was like, that's how we found you. I started getting angry, but I knew immediately that my mom was broken. And when someone is broken and they have not healed, they are not equipped to help you. I knew that immediately because my sister had been sexually assaulted multiple times, and my sister succumbed to drugs and alcohol. She's still alive, but that got a hold of her because she never dealt with it. But she shared that when she first told my mom said, well, you're not the only one. You know, so I immediately knew that my mom was broken. But there was a part of me saying, I don't care about her being broken. I'm her daughter. I want her to be here for me. But now as an adult, and I understand that broken people who have not healed, they cannot help. That's why it's a cycle. That's why it's like, well, my mother was abused by her husband. Now I'm in an abusive relationship. That's why it's a cycle, because when folks don't heal, they can't help. So I was determined when I had my daughter that I was going to get through this. First of all, he took the Olympics away from me. So I was like, he ain't going to keep taking stuff from me. So I was determined to break that cycle in my family. I speak out. I mean, people in my family still, you know, feel a certain way towards me because my brother was so loved and everything. But I'm like, it is what it is. This is what happened. It won't happen again. You know, we're not gonna say that Uncle so-and-so touched somebody and nobody's gonna call Uncle so-and-so on it, and we're gonna still have children around that person. That happens all the time in families, right? We're not doing that. We're not doing that.
Sadly, it does.
Yeah, so I was animate. Like my mom never wanted to say he tried to rape me. She said he attacked me. I said, we're going to use that word because that's what it is. So I was very feisty, but I felt like I was all alone. Like I was all alone in that fight. But I love my mom, and I know that she loved me the best way she could with everything she had. But it took some time for me to forgive her and then to ultimately forgive myself. I was a very angry, bitter child for a long time. And I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. Dre said he teaches in Brooklyn. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. And then we moved to Rayford, North Carolina. So I was a New Yorker, you know, but the crack hit our family really hard in the 80s. So.
Wow. You know, this man, please allow me to say, as Melvin Lars, the nobody asked me guy, that's one of the reasons, not the assault specifically, but one of the reasons that I adhere to that title is because people don't talk to other individuals. We're not empathetic. We're not sympathetic. We just take it all as if the person is not conducting themselves or acting the way we think they should, then they're just weird. And because of our lack of empathy and sympathy for other human beings, and as you share that story, and it's not a story, as you share that part of your life, and as you share your life, that is very, very huge. And please allow me to say to our audience, and I'm loving the fact of all these thumbs up, and I just have to admit, I don't want to upset Winifred, but you know, a lot of sad faces are going up and that kind of thing, Winifred. And
I often think about my life and what happened. And you know, I grew up hard. Like all my siblings, except for maybe two and my new sibling, you know, my mom had 4 children. 2 were strung out on crack and alcohol. My brother was schizophrenic who tried to rape me. So you have this schizophrenic who you didn't raise, and then you had me. I wasn't on drugs and alcohol, not a teen mom. You know, being young, thinking, Mom, come on, let's just move away. You're a nurse. We own a home. Let's move away. It'll be fine. You know, angry, bitter, but it's made me who I am. You know, I was able to help families when I was doing rape crisis volunteer work. A 14-year-old was assaulted and her mom and dad came and I have to pick. I can't talk to the child because she was 14, so I picked the father, right? I was able to help that father. I know that through this journey, I know that I've helped several people before this book because I would talk about it as casually as someone on the television being assaulted, and someone would say something stupid like, oh, well, now she slept with all those men. And I said, well, can you imagine being violated like that and never feeling like you have control? I said, so in order for you to gain control, wouldn't you keep trying to do something? So being promiscuous is not always being fast, right? Because I'm 40. Look, I had to think about how old I am, y'all. My birthday's next month. And I still don't feel safe being intimate. And it's been 20 plus years. You know what I mean? So yeah. I know that I have helped people, and I'm not embarrassed. I'm not ashamed. This is something that happened for whatever reason. It was in the plan. You know, this is something that happened to me, but I don't want it to continue to happen to others. My brother was schizophrenic and we ignored the signs. We didn't know. But what some of the things that he was doing was not normal. But I'm like, oh, he's just quirky. You know, he's just country. That was my favorite line. I was like, oh, he country. You know, he grew up down south. He country. But we were ignoring the signs. And again, my mother being broke, she was a nurse. She had to know the signs. But by her herself being broken, you know, she just wasn't able to help. Now I know that my mother was taking Prozac. I didn't know what the hell Prozac was back then. She was depressed. You know, she was functionally depressed. She was going to work. She was managing bills. You know, she had a house. She was a single mom, but she was depressed. Like, I want to say long-term depression. I mean, shit, I'd be depressed if I had 2 kids that were strung out on drugs and alcohol, and I'm working, and our house was that house. I don't know if anybody from New York, and you know that you got that house where the cops stay there. We call 911 and I start to say my address and they already know. That's how our house was popping.
I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing because
I make jokes.
No. Wow. Well, listen, it's wow. It's certainly been great having you here. Please, if you will, share with our audience how they might contact you, how they might get the book,
Sure.
etc.
Sure. You can find me on Facebook under Winifred A. Winston. Just type my name in there, Winifred A. Winston on Facebook. And to get an autographed copy of the book, you would go to www.winifred.unchainmemama.com. So you can see in the background, that's the cover of the book. It's I want to call it a trilogy because there's a 1 and this is 2. 1 is pink, this is 2, this is purple, and another one is coming out. But www.winifred.unchainmemama.com, and you can find me on Facebook under Winifred A. Winston. And please, if you have questions, I mean, you might not want to type it in the chat because it's uncomfortable. You don't know how to say it right. You don't want to, just say it, be transparent. Just reach out to me. If you have a question about dyslexia, if you have a question about overcoming sexual assault, whatever it is, just ask me, inbox me. Don't worry about trying to dress it up. Just ask your question, because oftentimes we don't get an opportunity to ask these questions, and it may be brewing inside of us. And I will tell you from firsthand experience, these type of traumatic experiences don't go away. They rear their ugly head whenever they want to. You have no control.
Well, listen, thank you so very much. Guys, this has been the Nobody Asked Me Guys show with none other than Dr. Winifred A. Winston. She's made it very clear that once you get the official title, then I will have permission to do that. Listen, again, let me wish everybody a Merry Christmas, a Happy Kwanzaa, and share with you, this is the last episode for 2019. However, January 10th, put that on your calendar. We're going to come back with a blockbuster. We're going to have attorney Darrell Washington. Those of you that were familiar and that are familiar with Botham Jean and the Amber Geiger case, where the Dallas police officer went into this gentleman's home and took his life. Attorney Darrell Washington is the attorney for that family, and we all know how the court case turned out. He will be here with us on January 10th at 7 p.m. So please tune in and help us out, okay? Now, also, let me encourage you guys to go to YouTube and subscribe. You can subscribe to this page on YouTube. Now, last thing, Mothers and Their Smen, an introspective look at mothers rearing their sons, is my latest publication. Feel free to stuff that stocking and get that book. It's a very, very good book. You get autographed copies at www.dyingonmyfeet.com, www.dyingonmyfeet.com. If you'd like to have a verbal conversation, contact me, 440-935-0374. We're never too important to talk to people, 440-935-0374. So listen, have a great evening. And again, Merry Christmas, Feliz Navidad, Happy Kwanzaa, all of those great things. Again, Winifred A. Winston, you are a phenomenal individual. And we like to say, we thank you so very much. And we'd like to offer again our condolences in the loss of your mom. We want you to have a great and blessed evening.
Happy New Year, everybody.